Lo humillaron al joven ranchero. Una semana después, 300 guerreros lo esperaban al amanecer. The dust still hung in the air of the little border town saloon when Mateo Vargas pushed through the swinging doors. 23 years old, sun-browned and lean from years of riding fence lines, he carried a burlap sack over one shoulder and a shy smile that Mateo had learned the world could be cruel. The sack was heavy with apples, crisp, red, perfect apples they'd picked at dawn from the small orchard his grandfather had planted behind the ranch house. He had come to town to share them, nothing more. His mother had taught him that fruit tastes sweeter when it's given away. The saloon was crowded that Saturday night. Cattle barons in starched collars drank beside dusty vaqueros, and a piano player hammered out a ragtime tune nobody was really listening to. Mateo set the sack on the bar and cleared his throat. Buenas noches, he said softly. My trees gave more than we can eat. Please, take one. They re good. A few men glanced over, amused. One took an apple, nodded thanks, and turned back to his whiskey. Then Clyde McAllister stood up. Everyone knew Clyde, he owned half the county and most of the fear that came with it. It was broad as a barn door and twice as mean when they'd been drinking, which was most evenings. What's this? Clyde boomed, snatching an apple and holding it high like evidence in a trial. The little Mex kid thinks he's Santa Claus now? Laughter rippled through the room. Mateo felt his cheeks burn, but he kept his voice steady. Just apples, señor. No charge. Clyde bit into the fruit, chewed once, then spat the pulp onto the sawdust floor. Tastes like charity, he sneered. I don't take charity from boys who still smell like their mama's milk. The laughter grew louder. Someone knocked the sack from the bar. Apples rolled everywhere, crushed under boots. A ranch hand kicked one straight into Mateo's shin. The pain was sharp, but the sting in his chest was worse. He knelt to gather what he could, hands trembling, while the room roared with mockery. Run on home, Chico, Clyde called. Before we decide to brand that pretty face. Mateo didn't run. He walked, head high, out into the night. The cold desert air hit him like a slap, but it cleared the tears before they could fall. Baying him, the saloon doors swung shut, and the laughter faded into the wind. He rode home under a sky full of stars, the crushed apples still sweet on his tongue. His grandfather was waiting on the porch, rocking slowly, the glow of his cigarette a tiny orange beacon. They didn't want them, abuelo, Mateo said, voice cracking despite his best effort. The old man studied him for a long moment. Did you want them to want them? Mateo thought about it. He thought it would make someone happy. His grandfather nodded. Then you already won, mijo. The rest is noise. But the noise followed Mateo for days. Word spread faster than wildfire. The young rancher who'd been humiliated in front of the whole town. Men laughed about it over coffee at the Mercantile. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Children reenacted the scene with sticks for apples. Mateo worked from dawn until the stars came out, mending fences, branding calves, trying to outrun the shame stitched to his name. A week later, before the sun had even thought of rising, Mateo saddled his horse and rode out to check the north pasture. Frost silvered the grass, and his breath hung in clouds. He crested the low ridge above the ranch and stopped dead. There, in the half-light, stood row upon row of mounted figures. 300, maybe more. Blankets draped over shoulders, rifles slung across saddle horns, faces painted with the colors of war. Apache. Not the small bands that sometimes traded at the fort, but warriors, real warriors, gathered like a dark tide. Mateo's heart hammered so hard he thought the horse must feel it. He had no rifle, no pistol, only the knife he used for cutting twine. For one terrifying moment he believed Clyde McAllister had hired them to finish what the saloon started. Then a single rider detached from the front line and walked his pony forward. The man was older, braids streaked with gray, a single eagle feather tied into his hair. He raised one hand, palm out. Mateo recognized him. Last summer, this man, Nantan, they called him, had come to the ranch with 2 thin children and a mule that could barely stand. Riders had burned their winter camp. They had nothing. Mateo's mother had fed them beans and cornbread for 3 days. Mateo himself had given the children apples from the same trees. He remembered how the little girl's eyes went wide when she tasted the fruit, how she'd hidden two in her dress to save for later. Nantan stopped 10 paces away. In careful Spanish he said, "We heard what they did to you in the town." Mateo swallowed. "It was only apples." "It was never only apples," Nantan replied. "You fed my grandchildren when they were hungry. You asked nothing. Now the men who laughed at you drink in that saloon, fat and loud. We have come to teach them respect." Mateo looked past Nantan to the silent ranks. 300 warriors at dawn. A note to burn the town to the ground and ride away before the soldiers at Fort Boy even knew what happened. His stomach turned. "No," he said. Nantan tilted his head, waiting. Mateo dismounted. His legs felt like water, but he walked forward until he stood face to face with the war leader. "If you ride in there with rifles, people will die. Innocent people. Children who had nothing to do with what happened to me. And the soldiers will come after you. They will hunt every camp until there is nothing left. Y won't they let my apples by that much blood?" For a long moment the desert was silent except for the wind hissing through the grass. Then Nantan did something Mateo never expected. "Ismail. You are your mother's son," he said. "She told us once that kindness is a fire that does not burn the hand that carries it. We will not ride into the town." Mateo let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "But," Nantan continued, "we will be seen." He raised his arm. As when, the warriors turned their ponies and began to move, not toward the town, but along the ridge, a slow, deliberate parade in full view of anyone who might look up from the valley below. 300 shadows against the rising sun, lances catching the first pink light. They rode in perfect silence, a living reminder that the world was wider and wilder than the saloon doors of a dusty border town. By the time the church bell rang for early mass, every soul in the settlement had seen them. Windows flew open. Men spilled into the street still in nightshirts. Clyde McAllister stood on the saloon porch, face the color of old ash, clutching a rifle he suddenly wasn't sure how to use. The warriors never paused. They crested the far ridge and vanished as quietly as they had come. That afternoon, Mateo rode into town to deliver milk to old Mrs. Gutierrez, who couldn't get out much anymore. The streets were strangely quiet. People watched him pass, but no one laughed. At the mercantile, the owner pressed an extra sack of coffee into his hands. "For your mother," he mumbled. Clyde McAllister was waiting outside the saloon, hat in his hands, looking smaller than Mateo remembered. Clyde cleared his throat. "I was wrong. About the apples. About everything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. "For the orchard. Plant another tree. Or 10. Mateo looked at the money, then at Clyde's flushed face. He took the bill, folded it once, and tucked it into the breast pocket of Clyde's vest. "Keep it," he said. "Buy apples for someone who needs them. And maybe say thank you when they offer." Clyde opened his mouth, closed it again, and nodded. That evening, Mateo sat on the porch with his grandfather, watching the stars come out one by one. Somewhere far off, a coyote sang to the moon. "You know," the old man said, lighting his cigarette, 300 warriors didn't they ride here for apples?" Mateo smiled. "No. They rode for what the apples meant." His grandfather blew smoke into the night. "And what was that, mijo?" "That even when the world tries to crush you, there's still sweetness left to give away." Years later, travelers passing through the territory would notice something curious. In the little town that once laughed at a boy with a sack of apples, every porch had a bowl on the railing. And in every bowl were apples, red, crisp, perfect, free for any stranger who knocked. No one could quite remember who started the custom, but everyone knew the story of the young rancher who refused to let humiliation write the ending. And if you rode out at dawn to the north pasture of the Vargas Ranch, you might still see them. Faint hoofprints in the dust, hundreds of them, pointing both ways across the ridge. A silent reminder that kindness, once given, can circle the world and come back wearing war paint and eagle feathers, ready to stand between you and the night. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is not making the world pay. It's proving the world was wrong about you from the very start.